launching a quick poll for you. It's an interesting one, and we've heard this a lot of times. It would be a good start for today. So you will see this poll on your screens. It's a single question poll. Okay, the response is interesting. So 75% people have said, and the poll was, what is more important? 75% of the people here have said idea, and 25% have said execution. Interestingly, I have not given the third answer, which is, from experience, both idea and execution hold equal importance. There are enough evidences of ideas that did not see the light of the day because of execution. And there are umpteen examples how great executions could not lead not so good ideas to success. So both of them go hand in hand. Of course, there may be 60-40, 40-60, case-to-case basis. But as a hypothesis overall, it is established that both execution and ideation go hand in hand. So while execution is a long chain of activities and initiatives in an organization, today we are going to focus on one very, very important leg of execution, which is getting it adopted by your organization, by your employees. So what are we talking of getting adopted? You could get an SOP getting adopted, a new guideline coming into rollout, very simple adoption for simple guidelines, communications, to complex adoptions around complex things like new product rollout, new tools and technology, new season rollouts, complex planograms in retail, complex new recipes in QSR, new ways of doing things in QSR, a new installation of engine or a cooking equipment in QSR, new ways of implementing a product in banking. So the rollouts can be immense, from new rollouts to new initiatives to driving adoption across your tools and technologies in an organization is a big piece of this entire leg of execution. And today we are going to focus on that. So what I'm going to commit today is one key takeaway from this conversation would be how you get one formula that fits it all in entirety to get and drive 100% adoption across your new initiatives, new rollouts, new products, new planograms, or new tools and technologies, irrespective of what the product is, what kind of initiative is it, and what kind of user base you're dealing. There's a very, very simple formula that we've cracked over a decade, working with hundreds of retailers, hundreds of QSR brands, a lot of banking customers with WooCom. So I have a simple presentation for you. We'll take you very simply, step by step, helping you understand what it takes to drive 100% adoption. But before I get there, I'd like you to type what have been your key challenges or reasons of pitfalls that you have not been able to drive adoption. Can you please quickly write on the chat? Please use the chat box for interaction. Please, I'm just writing a message. Type challenges in adoption. Could you please type on the chat or on the Q&A box? Anyone which is easily accessible. Any key challenge that you have faced in driving adoption in your organization? Okay, while people respond to this, so we have come across a lot of areas in this entire chain of getting any new initiative rolled out in an organization. And all of this, trust me, have been commonsensical, which seems so obvious, but missing such obvious stuff has resulted into non-adoption or a lack in adoption of that initiative. So the first and the foremost is like any other adoption strategy, it starts with the first step. Just sharing my screen here. As you see on the screen, WIIFM. So this, I'm not talking about the red FMs of the world, but I'm talking about what's in it for me. So it is very interesting that an organization brings in a new technology, a new product, a new rollout with a certain objective and a longer outcome for the organization. It may be the revenue impact, it may be a cost impact, it may be productivity impact for their employees. So there is some core purpose behind rolling anything new in the organization. But the counter thing to that is that not every time the what's in it for me for the users is identified very, very clearly. So while the rollout is brought into ideation and execution by the leadership or key business owners in the organization, but the last mile, who is going to adopt this, is not understood very clearly, and his needs and wants are not taken into consideration. And hence we see the first pitfall where the biggest of the rollouts, even long back, if you remember, the biggest of the ERP implementations used to fail. And we used to hear so many cases. Now this is not a scenario because they've cracked it like all other rollouts. So one of the biggest pitfall why it fails is because of the inherent change, resistance to the inherent change and inertia of the human beings. So if we understand this leg very, very clearly in planning any new rollout, I think we have half won the battle. So IIFM, which is what's in it for me, has to be clearly communicated from the organization's perspective. That what is the organization getting, communicating that larger picture to each and every person across the organizational hierarchy. And then going down to the end user who's going to actually start using that new rollout, understanding what is his persona. Is he tech savvy? Is he not tech savvy? Does he understand instructions in multi languages, or does he understand instructions only in his own language? What is his quick or adaptability? Once you figure out the user's mindset, then you can define very clearly that what is going to change when this new rollout will be rolled out for him, and what's going to change in its life. And when we talk about the bigger picture of impact for the organization and for the user is when this comes into sync. So we've seen even a simple guideline change to the SOP has resulted in failure of the entire rollout because the last person refused to understand the importance of it, or he was not communicated the gravity of this instruction. And we've seen very, very large rollouts over thousands of users across organizations becoming very, very successful if this need and context is established in the beginning. So that's the first step. And I think it's very commonsensical, even when it comes to habit formation. We may give up a very daring habit if you're given a good enough reason that suits us. So it's just about making that very, very clear to the last audience in the organization. What is the second? It's again very, very, what is the second thing? It's again very, very simple. Go to user strategy. So we've all heard about go to market strategy, but very few people think about the go to user strategy. So like I shared with you, a rollout starts with the leadership team. An SOP compliance may start with an SOP change may start with the leadership deciding to change the SOP, the business owners deciding to change the SOP. A new season rollout will decide with the visual merchandising, instructing that rollout. A new tool or a technology coming for process optimization may start with the tech team deciding what new needs to be coming in. But till the time the user understands what it is, it doesn't get adopted the way it should be. So we all focus so much on marketing it outside the organization, but understanding the network within the organization. I remember very good example we were given few years back. It is like an instruction when has to travel from the brain to any part of the system in the human anatomy. There is a network that it follows. In fact, on the GPS, when we have to track a particular location, go from place A to place B, we put the destination, and then there are a couple of options, and there is a proper network. Likewise, there is a flow or a network inside the organization, and with every new rollout, organizations that continue to adopt very well each and every new rollout, they understand and improvise that existing network. So we always have a communication network. We always have a mechanism in which things go in the organization. It is just that few organizations continue to work in silos, but few organizations continue to improvise it with every learning, and hence it becomes very meaningful. So understanding what works in an organization, what dictates the rollout, who all needs to be mapped. For example, in one of the organizations that we did a very large rollout, one of the top QSR companies in the companies across the globe is one of our clients. While we would like to share the names, but a lot of our clients want this information to stay confidential. Hence, we are not divulging exact names and details of these companies. So they have 30,000 plus workforce. And for them, this Booker app had to become the app for the end user at the store. So for that information to go to the store, they need to first establish what needs to improve for the store user. And then they did the complete messaging of what will change in his life, and figured out that if that information has to reach the store manager, how does it flow into the organization? So while there is an end user, there is an influencer. That influencer is a superior. It could be an area manager, it could be cluster managers. There are also other influencers and enablers like a tech team or a help desk team that listens back from the users. So this entire mapping from the leadership team to the user has to be done beforehand. And messaging strategy has to be built in for each and every user type in this whole journey. Once we do that, I think we are good to start with the rollout. In case you have any questions till now, I would be happy to take it right away. Okay, so I don't see any questions, so I'll move forward. Now we've understood what's in it for me, for the users, and for each person in that whole journey of rollout. We've understood what is the go-to strategy within that organization. The next is the messaging is come into place. What message goes in for what kind of person or persona? Once that is established, timelines are set, plan has been made. The next step is to communicate. And I'm not saying communicate, I'm saying over communicate. Take enough time and bandwidth to over communicate what it means for the users, how they adapt it, how to use it, and trainings are a very important part of this whole piece. So when we used to plan rollouts across organizations, in the initial days, we used to figure out the network within the organization. And wherever we were unable to get the whole network, we faced glitches in that whole piece, because that whole path from the leadership to the user for a rollout is not seamless. There are hiccups and ditches in that whole path. So the moment we figured out that these are the bottlenecks that might result in slowdown of the rollout, and we mapped the entire network and the lifetime for the organization, we were able to command seamless rollouts. And we were able to extend this practice to all our existing clients. So over communication is a very important part, be it trainings, be it talking to them, be it hand holding, be it providing enough support from the help desk, and also constant reminders from their superiors and leadership on how it will impact and add up to the whole picture in the organization. So once you've done all of that, what you've actually done is you've set up the network, and the whole piece has started to move till the last user in the organization. So once that starts to happen, the next step is to track progress. And what it means to track progress. So I remember, I'll share a very important case study from one of the largest footwear retailers across the globe who is a client. So the first thing the complexity of the business for them was that it was a franchisee, 100% franchisee owned model. So all their stores across 500 plus locations in the country were franchisee stores. So there were two folds of complexity. One, that the retailer was operating with the franchisees who had 50 plus stores under each franchisee. And then the communication flew from the franchisee to the employees, then to the finally to the store employees. So then there was an added layer of complexity in this whole piece. And when they wanted to roll out a new SOP or a guideline or a visual merchandising challenge across all their locations, they faced a lot of challenge even to communicate a simple guideline to this network. Once they used to communicate, the second leg of getting feedback from the ground was again very, very complex. So how they streamlined this entire thing, and I think that was a case study for us. That retailer is still with us for 7+ years. And likewise, we were able to onboard many, many more retailers and players in the organizations that we dealt with, and we were able to make them successful. So they did some very, very simple stuff. Firstly, they set the right context with the leadership team. So their own MD, who was responsible for the business, went on to conduct a town hall with all the people on VUCA, and they were able to reach out with that message very clearly with all the users. That was the first step. Then they also ensured that this next message is adopted. They were able to invite people who were able to write good questions, top 3 people come back and have dinner with the leadership team. So that they ensure that what they were circulating to the people on the ground was coming back and assimilated. So they called people, interacted with them, and then this whole rollout was planned through their entire chain of managers. So all the franchisees heads, all the franchisee heads were called to the corporate office for a one-on-one interaction and training on what's going to happen and how they are going to get benefited with this new tool. Once they were all set up and they were all ignited with the idea and the whole impact of this entire rollout, they went back and then they did the next level of download to all the cluster managers, area managers, and also down below to the teams. Several rounds of training, hand holding were happening. And after that, the rollout happened. It's like a big engine. You fix each tire and then you get the whole engine or the whole plane to join and fly. And that is how it took off. And of course, because of the entire lifeline and the network being set very, very crisply and proactively, within 3 days, they got 100% adoption. That became a case study for us and for them as well till date. So even in a very, very complex and challenging environment, a franchisee store environment, this became seamless and we were able to crack our formula. So that's how you see they were able to set this entire lifetime. Track progress made this 3 days adoption very, very simple because every moment they were able to track progress. Now on VUCA is a super app where you can create multiple apps for your operations, for your visual merchandising, or for any business, any process which is happening on Excel sheet, pen and paper in few minutes and roll out. So that is the power of VUCA. But the other power of VUCA was that they were able to track instantly what was happening. So I remember when we first used to do rollouts and mobiles were not so connectivity was a lot of challenge. So we used to directly go to the process compliance and we used to grapple with people going behind people, giving organizations the mandate to go behind people. And we used to learn that this was a natural trend for all their rollouts. So 40-50% adoption was considered to be a very, very good number in organizations. Then when we decoded it, it is actually very simple. What do you track? You track very basic stuff. You track, for example, there is a technological rollout, a new process or an application is being rolled out. The first measure is, are people downloading the app? And getting that data instantly and relaying back to the organization made the first step very simple. So if you know that the rollout has to happen to 10,000 people, but the app download is only 1,000, you know for sure on the first day that you still need to get 9,000 more downloads to be successful. And isn't this very simple? But the typical mistake and the pitfall that people try to do is they get to the bigger picture immediately. They get to the end goal immediately. Okay, how many people are complying to the process, how many people are accessing the tool, how many people are filling the data on this new application. But we tend to miss the basic input that if the downloads have not happened, then the adoption cannot happen. And this goes for everything. Likewise, for example, an organization which used to do visual merchandising planogram rollouts, they used to send all their people manually going traveling, getting them to understand the SOP. So typically an SOP rollout or a new VM guideline rollout used to take months and not days, months initially, because the cluster manager and the area manager had to go down to the store, get the store guy to sit with them, open the planogram, get him to understand everything, and then they fill in, give him an update on the execution and come back. So this was not a day's activity, it was a few months activity. All of this got streamlined in WooCommerce because they were able to get these simple data points that if a planogram is released to 1,000 stores in any geography, instantly you get to know how many of those 1,000 people have read, opened, or not opened. And once you get that data point, you know, okay, this basic matrix is there. So what I'm going back on track progress is that you need to break down even how you want to track the progress of an initiative or a rollout. You know, to figure out what is a basic matrix, and then you need to go to the next step. Sorry about this. Just give me a minute. There is. I'm back. There was a technical glitch. So track progress is very simple, that you need to have a tool to enable you to get instantly what is the on-ground feedback on each step of rollout. Have people downloaded the app? Have they been able to log in? Have they been able to access the new guideline? Have they been able to read the new guideline? Have they been able to submit those uh, records? And once you get real-time data, you know the progress in the stipulated time. And because of this data being available, we were able to track a 3-day adoption cycle for thousands of stores. And now this has become a norm across all our clients. And after this, before this, so we continue to go back and talk to people about these rollouts and about this entire chain of adoption. But there's a very, very important leg before we go to the last mile of making this successful. So we continue to get feedback immediately on ground. So if the end user is facing a challenge on how he's using it, is there a hiccup, is there a technology, is there interconnectivity issue? So when we rolled out one of the processes for the biggest QSR player, we figured out that they were not able to submit data. They were not able to submit data because the moment they filled the entire form, which was like a long form, they lost connectivity. And then we knew that, okay, there needs to be an additional feature of offline that needs to be built in. So every new rollout will give you some improvisations and feedbacks that you go back and enhance your rollout or technology or tool. And that listening to the last mile in the organization is very, very important. In few cases, it is also behavioral change. So we've also figured out that one of the pitfall is that people do not adapt to change because of their behavioral conditionings. And hence it is important to orient the users in that light. So orientation again becomes a very important part of messaging and over communicating. So it is not one step and it's frozen. It is like you move the cycle, few turbines are moving, and then you go back and again to make those turbines move till you achieve your goal of driving 100% adoption. And finally, What typically is the tendency for all of us is that we continue to talk about what's not working, what's not happening, some new technology, there are so many bugs. This becomes a common parlance, and that results in a lot of demotivation in this entire rollout. So while we continue to get feedbacks from people, while we continue to listen to people of what's working, what's not working, but it is very, very, very important to figure out what's working, what's successful, appreciate the small wins, and hence celebrate is an important cycle. It is not an end goal, it is part of this entire journey. So once you achieve a small success, let's say in that 100% adoption, you achieve a 20% milestone, you achieve few users who become consistent with adopting or accepting that new way of working, you highlight those people. You get their voices and you republish that voice in your network. So celebrating this whole piece is a very, very important step, and it's not the last goal. We should not wait. So what we recommend is that a lot of times so much negativity creeps in the whole rollout process that whatever has happened also collapses. So what we recommend as a best practice is that whenever you achieve a small success, break your largest success into smaller goals and milestones before the rollout, and say, okay, and on 20%, that's a reason to celebrate. On 40%, there's another reason to celebrate. When X number of users are able to fill this up consistently for so many days, there's a reason to celebrate. And once you do that, it becomes very, very easy. In fact, last week, we also had few of our clients like Lenskart and another apparel brand who came in and shared about quick wins. So celebration becomes one of the most important point. And celebration does not just mean partying. It means blowing your trumpet about the success, blowing trumpet about the user's success, and highlighting to everybody who's part of this rollout in the organization, and giving this voice back to your leadership team. So when a store user is adapting very seamlessly, you need to make a poster or you need to acknowledge him on your forum in the organization, and everybody else needs to get communicated about a success so that you get more successes. It's a spinball effect. So if you focus on what's not working, that will spin into what's not really working more and more. But if you focus and highlight successes, you will see many, many more successes coming in. So celebrate is really a step and it's not a journey. I would like to reiterate, we should not wait for the last phase of the rollout for celebrating. You must celebrate whenever you receive small successes and wins. And celebrating means highlighting people's success to them and to others amply and in full sense. Then the final thing. So once you, let's say we've covered all these steps, once you cover the first and the last step will celebrate, you go back and you go back and you go back till you achieve your goal. And once you've achieved your success or the first success, you've achieved 100% adoption. That was the end goal for the new rollout, for the new planogram, for the new season layout theme, for the new sales theme, for the new tool and technology. I'm just repeating again so you get more ideas of how adoption in your organization is like your daily activity, but we never tend to recognize that. Then the final stage of the whole process is to institutionalize it. And when I mean institutionalize it, I mean now this becomes the way of working for people in your organization. And while what happens is the tendency is to just sit back and relax after you achieve 100% adoption. But that's not the case because it's still not become a habit. If you read a few self-help books, you would have read that 21 days is needed for a habit to become institutionalized for a person's life. 60 days is another good practice. But in an organization, there has to be fencing to make that habit or rollout institutionalized. And there are few basic best practices that we have figured out with the organization. So the retailer case study that we've been talking about today, the largest footwear retailer, there were two simple things that they did to institutionalize, and it's still working and working across all organizations flawlessly. The first is that there is a hierarchy in the organization. So the moment everybody in the hierarchy starts adopting that technology, that rollout, that new process, then you know that there is one bit of stability and pillarizing of this whole effect. So if the store manager is filling up on information or he's doing that season planogram, his boss or the visual merchandising head goes and reviews it. And then his boss questions it and sees it. And hence it becomes a practice, and when they do it number of times is when it gets institutionalized. So this is one simple way that the end user is doing it, and the reporting is flowing till the leadership team, and then that message that the leadership team is reviewing it goes back to the user, makes it one complete cycle of institutionalizing. All of this sounds very logical and commonsensical. It's just that we have an oversight for it, and hence we tend to miss one or the other step. So the first thing is that institutionalizing it, it's very simple. The entire hierarchy needs to adopt and use that in some which ways. The second big piece that we found it useful is that if we build it in their existing KPIs. So whenever there is a new rollout, you may find interesting ways of not policing, but incentivizing through existing ways of KPIs in the organization. So one of the organizations that we were working with, what they did was that all the learning scores from the SOP modules went back to their quarterly scorecards, and hence there was this incentive calculation, which was a summation of sales plus other parameters, plus one aspect of new rollouts. And after doing this cycle for a couple of times, they were able to ensure that the process or the new rollout is institutionalized. So that's what it is. A quick sequence of few steps followed by the last leg of institutionalizing would make your every rollout successful with just this simple formula. We've tried it umpteen number of times across thousands of people, across geographies, across different domains and industries of clients, and we have seen this working every time with a bang. So while we can take questions now, but I have with me somebody I could have none better than her on giving insights to drive 100% adoption. So you can actually put your questions, raise your hand, type your questions in the Q&A box, or type your messages on the chat while I call upon Sarika Pandey, who is the go-to person to get all the best practices on making all rollouts 100% adopted. Hi, Sarika.
Hi. Hi.
So nice to see you. I could have none better than you talk about adoption, because she's somebody who's worked relentlessly over 10 years with so many people from ground till the leadership team, working and seeing those areas where we're not working, to bringing them to this cracked formula that I have spoken and shared in these last 40, 30, 35 minutes. So, Sarika, today we look upon you to share with us very crisply of what it takes to drive 100% adoption across situations.
Sure. Thanks, Rashu. So I actually, when we started building WUCO, a lot of companies that I partnered with would say, but what about user adoption? And that was like a perpetual question in their head. I didn't come from an IT background, so I struggled to understand that question initially. But as we started with these rollouts, I never found adoption an issue at all. From day one, like from the first company I partnered with, he had 100% adoption over a period of 3 years while I was managing that account personally. 36 months, every month I have reviewed the progress on that account, and 36 months, every month I had 100% adoption across outlets. And the formula was actually very simple. And some of it, some of the other companies that we partnered with, there were a couple which did struggle. And there were many from whom we learned some of these best practices, which just make life very easy. And the formula is actually very simple. Step one, start with fun. No one has to teach anyone how to use TikTok. It is a very complex tool to use. It's not easy to create a TikTok video. It's not easy to create an Insta reel or a YouTube short. But look at the kind of reels you are seeing today. Look at the profile of people who are being featured there. There are villagers getting showcased. There are less educated people going there. Why are they able to do that? The kind of tech savviness that we are seeing happening, why are they able to do that? Because they want to, they are motivated to. And one of the biggest challenges that I've seen with companies who are struggling with adoption is they are only focused on what the leadership wants. I want to drive compliance on XYZ processes, but they are completely forgetting what the guy out there in the field wants. He wants to be seen. He wants to be heard. He wants to be recognized. He wants to feel special. So if I start with fun and I create a simple activity using which I am able to get him to, get seen by everyone around him, feel special, feel recognized, adoption is a no-brainer. This is the single, the most critical item, and that's why this is the first one on my list. If you get this right, if you get the fun element right, and I've seen examples like, someone started with a cricket quiz, someone started with almost like betting, but of course the only thing you could win was movie tickets. So someone started with a cricket quiz, someone started with a talent hunt, and we saw, people coming and doing dances, people doing wacky dresses, and singing, some pathetic ones also, but they felt special. Selfie contests, wacky video contests, wacky picture contests, special skills contests. So anything where they are able to bring something about themselves to the core. If that is the first launch I do, adoption will cease to be a problem before the problem, before that scenario even starts. And that to me was the biggest mantra that we got right. As we started every rollout, and every single company which has listened to this particular one and acted upon it has not had adoption as a challenge at all. The second part, because this is something that, of course, I'm not going to be doing every day. This is something I can do once in a while, and I should continue to do once in every while, not just at the start, but once every 3 months or 6 months or 1 year. I have to also watch out for my team. It's not just about, what we need from them. It's also about what we can do for them. So I strongly recommend don't do it just as a one-time activity. Plan for it as something which will be recurring, wherein some simple fun activity is going live once every while. I leave the frequency to customers because every company will have different bandwidth issues. Some may have HR teams, some may not have HR.
Sarika, you've gone on mute. Sarika, you've gone on mute. You're mute.
Yeah, the second one I would recommend is go for, which is what is required for ongoing adoption, is ensuring that we are actually reviewing progress. So make sure that your area managers and regional managers and at the national level, one, people know how to review progress, how to use those reports, what kind of decisions and actions to plan from those. And at the head office, you are actually, making sure that those decisions and actions are happening. If your managers don't manage, your team will not execute. And at the end of the day, no amount of effort is going to make, people do something every day if nothing happens because of them doing or not doing it. If I slept one day and my manager didn't do anything, I slept a second day and my manager didn't do anything, third day onwards, I'll stop doing it. It's as simple as that. So people have to recognize that, if it is if I slip, if something doesn't get done, something happens. So the only way to ensure that that is happening is that because I'm reviewing it, and I'm reviewing it not because I want them to do it. I'm reviewing it because this is my company's SOP. And I care about the fact that the SOP is followed or not. If I don't care about the SOP being followed, then I don't know what to say there, but it's a necessity. I mean, the reason you are digitizing your SOPs is because you want to make sure your SOPs get followed. So something needs to happen if the SOP is not followed, if there are slippages. So that's the definite second. Make sure your area managers, regional managers are trained and they are actually doing what they need to do. The third item on my list would be publishing, as Rashu was earlier mentioning, inclusion of this SOP compliance somewhere in my incentive plan, somewhere in my recognition or performance measures. Because again, if the SOP is really that important, it has to be part of my performance appraisal program. So if it is not part of, if it doesn't impact my life, if I don't do that, and it is just about having a difficult conversation once in a while, not much will change on an ongoing basis. But at some point, if I am doing these three things right, there is a 99% probability that adoption will no longer be a problem. And as I usually say, getting someone to do their job cannot be my job. It cannot be your area manager's job to make sure the store managers are doing the job every day. The store area manager's job is to review, have an all-encompassing review of which this is one element. And if I'm doing a strong review, my team will automatically start doing their job on an ongoing basis. But these are the top 3 mantras I would share. There is a lot more which is good to do, but these 3 things, if done, it's more than enough to make sure that adoption doesn't become a challenge.
Great, Sarika. I'm glad you said that. So we did talk about how change, ability to change and inertia of human behavior becomes one of the top challenges. And I think the fun part really takes care of that. So that's a quick recipe. Sarika, while you've summarized it beautifully and we've seen all of this working, while you say 99% you're being generous, but now I see it's 100% crack formula. If you do all of this right, don't miss any of it. But I'd still like you to share, what have you seen as the top 3 challenges that people face, or the top 3 pitfalls, despite knowing that all of this is commonsensical, they still tend to repeat it?
So first and foremost, people think fun is extra effort and it's not worthwhile. So it's all focused on what I need from the stores, and there is less attention on what I need to do for them. We don't talk about what's in it for you. We don't create something in it for them. So as an example, in most of the rollouts, and at least the rollouts I have been personally involved in, I have usually asked the operations head a question on day 1 or day -1, something, that what is your current compliance level? How many store managers are currently updating the start of day checklist? And do you know if they're actually doing this walkthrough? And 100% of them say, I don't even know whether they get up out of the back room or is it just paper whipping? And they sit in the back room and once a week you just do tick, 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 tick. So what happens, is, and I've been in the front myself. I used to be a banker and I was responsible for running a branch. And while it's more complex, but at some levels it's similar, we had a lot of operational tasks where a whole lot of checklists and processes had to be followed operationally. But at the end of the day, the only question my boss would ask me is, sales kitna hua? What's the sales number? So eventually what happens after a while is that those operation tasks take a back seat. And what we did was, once every week or once in a month, we would just take out all of those operational checklists and we'll do tick, 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 tick across. And we never really, ran any of those processes on the ground. And that's a reality. I mean, I was a very committed worker, but that was the reality, not just for me, but for almost every branch around. But with digitization, what happens is, day 1, I have to start actually getting up from my desk and actually doing that walkthrough and actually doing those checks. So suddenly something which was 10 minutes a week has become a 1 hour a day job. There will definitely be resistance. I mean, my work has just been increased, and end of the day, you're going to question me on sales, and I don't want to be doing these operational tasks. So I will resist. I will find every reason why this is not working. So it is very important to create a sense of a perception of what's in it for me. This is one of the big points of failure, not having anything in it for the person out there who's going to now have to spend 1 more hour a day doing that one job, or 3 more hours a day doing 3-4 such jobs over the day. So that's one of the biggest pitfalls, not creating what's in it for them. The second is, when area managers or regional managers don't see the reports, the national head not seeing the report and not using it as part of the reviews, not making decisions around it, and making it just something that's there in the background. So that's the second thing, that if I'm not, what I review will get done. What is measured is will get managed. What I don't measure will not get managed. So that's the second common thing, that while we want to do stuff, but we are not able to put in resources behind or bandwidth behind seeing it end to end, seeing it through to results, and dropping the ball along the way because of the typical urgent versus important problem. And the third common pitfall I've seen is that even if I have done all of this, the third common area is that when something changed, that let's say one operations head moved out and a new operations head moved in, or one regional head moved out and the new regional head moved in, we did not include this as part of that onboarding program and thus programs that were running possibly at an amazing level initially. After this transition to a new person, this new person doesn't get an ID and this new person doesn't get to know about it. It's not part of the handover. Now, if an ID were created, maybe they could have been at least a digital handover, but in absence of an ID also getting created. So not having institutionalized it as part of the new employee onboarding program is a very common pitfall, because of which a new regional head who came in, because people change all the time. See, store managers will come and go, area managers will get transferred or move into other roles, new area managers will come in. But at some point, when the transition is not managed well, and this has not made it to the SOP, that reports have to be made available to the new area manager. The new area manager has to have a quick introduction or training around how to see these reports. So in the transition process, things fall apart. And that's, I would see as a common pitfall on a long-term basis, because of which, while one manager stays, things would be hunky-dory. The manager changes, the new manager is not aware, things fall astray somewhere along the line. And at some point, the new manager says, but no one is using it, so might as well just drop it. And let's do something else instead. So we are back to square one, and 2 years, 3 years down the line, we'll find that we have actually gone back to square one. But if we watch out for these, we can achieve a lot more.
Sure. I'm glad Sarika mentioned the last point, because that is very important. So typically where initiatives fail, they are person-centric initiatives. And when we institutionalize it, the idea is that those are made process-oriented, SOP-oriented, and hence there is a proper handover. So one point, in fact, I did not cover, and Sarika, I'm glad that she covered, is that we have to fence that whole initiative. So, for example, there was a way of working before a new technology, a new rollout. It was happening on pen and paper, or it was happening in a new way, or an older way. So when we mean it needs to be fenced, we need to cut out the cords of that data flow or of that process flow in the old way. We need to make it completely shift to the new way. Everybody needs to track that way of working, cut down on what was existing to fence it. And then only it will become a big tree. And when people are getting transferred, new people are coming in, there has to be adequate process and SOP around how this becomes a auto transfer of or a handover of the initiative. So thanks, Sarika. Another thing I think you worked really interestingly and creatively is how do we celebrate and how do we highlight successes? Share some of that in interesting ways with people.
Sure. So a few things. One way of celebrating that I've seen the most effective has been, and one of the reasons that VUCA retro space, the video that we have on the home screen of VUCA, we have stayed with and we have been committed to, is because when your team members start getting featured there, and given the nature of staff at stores and restaurants, they want to be seen, they want to be heard. When they start getting featured there is nothing they can crave more than that. I have, with one of the companies I have partnered with, they actually used to bring values. They had at that point of time recently launched the company's values, and they had brought in a consulting firm and spent a few crores and defined the values for the organization, at a very large organization, very large enterprise. And they were working on ensuring that all their franchisee partner stores are displaying those values with customers. And one of the contests that we started with as part of that engagement and fun part of the rollout was starting to bring stories of how people at outlets are living up those company values. And those videos of people who would share, tell stories like, this customer left this cash here and I found it and I ran behind, and they had mentioned that, hey, we are going for a movie after this. I went to the hall and I, got someone to pause and, get this person called because there was almost 2 lakh rupees of cash there that was left behind in the out store. And, when those kind of stories people tell on a video, and those get showcased back on that retro space, for the entire organization. This particular company actually named VUCA as a company brand TV.com. .vuka.com. So for them, it became the company's TV. And one of the reasons that also happened was because the employees, because these are franchisee stores and large outlets, they had televisions in their outlets. And whenever, almost every day some story would go live, and the franchisee would just plug it into the TV and show them all the videos on TV. So for them, wo gaya, sir, hum TV pe kaise? How can we be on TV? So that's one of the things I've seen them valuing a lot, that recognition, that visibility to the larger organization, and being able to see them, being able to go home and show this app to their wife. See, I am on video, I'm on the homepage today. And they start craving for that opportunity. But of course, that requires a certain amount of diligence at the head office, because someone at HR or operations will need to make sure that we are collecting enough of those and we are broadcasting them back. It's just 5 minutes of work for a time, but if we don't do it, if we don't keep the rigor on, if we don't stay disciplined about it, it's very easy to lose momentum there. But I would say that is one of the top areas I've seen for celebrating successes. Also, another thing I've seen, because while this is around users and adoption, one of the big areas is around producers also at the head office. Now we have to keep in mind, there are these people at the head office, typically operations team, VM team, HR team, who are running these new initiatives and new programs around digitization, who have to go through a lot of extra work through those early days around, driving that change. There's a lot of change management effort that they put in. And often that goes unrecognized. So if we can also bring them up for recognition and celebration, as in when they achieve a successful transformation and achieve some outcomes out of that. And that is something that, our team is also continuously reaching out to yours to understand that, if there are any impacts that have been achieved. We are also, with several customers, we partner and we write these case studies. Like with one of our customers, we actually, help them publish a case study book of about 20 stories, which was shared. This was a multinational brand. So, and Rashu, I think, was part of that exercise where we helped them publish these 20 case studies of impact achieved by their head office team members. And it was not for everyone else. It was not for us. It was just for them. This whole book was published and printed, about 50 to 100 copies, which was released by their CEO in an internal event and handed over to all the people who had contributed, along with certificates for them for the transformational outcomes that they had achieved. And they were sent to all their offices across the globe, US, China, Middle East, emerging markets, everywhere they sent these books. And these people suddenly were on top of the world, and the kind of impact they had achieved suddenly felt so special that they were willing to do a lot more in order to impact the organization. So that's another area for the head office guys who are creating such programs and driving this transformation. Because in every company, in a 1,000 people company, all you need is 10 people. Those 10 people being sparked is enough to create a move in that company. All you need to do is those 10 people, they'll move the remaining 900 for you. But the key is to recognize and celebrate those 10 people. And if it is a 100 people company, there may be only one person actually. That one person can move mountains and create a shift in the company. But that one person needs to be recognized.
Totally. So while it takes a lot of logic and a lot of reasoning to execute something, launch it, but it takes few human emotions that needs to be understood, appreciated to make it successful. Well summarized, Sarika. Sarika, one last thing, I think what we've seen is wherever there is a leadership participation to this whole piece of rollout, that becomes very, very easy. So what is your advice? What is your learning on that piece?
So I've seen both scenarios. I've seen cases where leaders have driven this. I've also seen like one of my first surprising rollouts, which was very successful, was this manager for the value channel, in a very large company, a 1,000-store company with 8 brands, had this one brand, one value channel manager managing just 20 outlets. But he did something, which he transformed the business by, and he became a role model for that 1,000 people organization, 1,000-store organization. That this is how things can be done. So I've seen the impact at both the levels. Of course, when there is leadership participation and drive, things are part of the reviews. And if they are part of the reviews, they will get driven faster, no doubts on that. But that said, even if it is a functional level rollout, even if it is a regional level rollout, what you need is one driven person who will do all of what is needed. And if that one driven person for his scope can do that, he will make an impact in that scope. I may be a regional head driving something for my region, but if I am making sure the people in my region are having fun, if I'm making sure I am reviewing progress for my region, if I am celebrating successes in my region, and if I have, of course, I can't include it in my incentive plans, but I may include it in part of some recognition program at my regional level. So if I drive it at my regional level, I will still move the mountains for my region. But of course, that will not something that will be institutionalized. It will be restricted to me. When I move, things will fall apart. That won't sustain. That kind of success doesn't sustain. It sustains only when it is driven centrally, because making sure that my training team has included this as part of the new employee onboarding program can't be done unless the leadership team is involved. My regional head is not going to be able to have that influence with the training team. And so on and so forth, including in the incentive program or, the KPIs. All of that can happen only with leadership participation and involvement. So that definitely eases out the likelihood and, probability and speed of success.
Yeah. And I remember on that note, the case study that we did with IIM Bangalore, I think, where how the innovation happens typically on the middle and the last mile in the organization. But what the leadership can ensure is how that innovation flows back to the leadership, and that becomes a best practice in the organization. In fact, you can look up that case study. It's a very, very interesting case study that we've been talking about on WOOCR and how WOOCR enables that. So thanks, Sarika. I think we're closing to 5. Just before we end, I would like to quickly take you through a report which I am very fond of on WOOCR. I wouldn't want to end without that. So here's a quick report on how we've been seeing stuff rolling out on WOOCR. Thanks to Sarika. She switched off her video, but thanks for bringing so many good insights, Sarika. And lovely that you've been part of so many rollouts. So as you see this, and this is an insight report that comes real time on WOOCR. So I've personally looked at this report for driving almost all kinds of rollouts. It's a very, very powerful report, which gives you visibility of how many users are active on a day-on-day basis on the platform. So if you know that you are doing a rollout for 10,000 employees, and at an average, only 9,000 employees are logging in and being active at any particular time, instantly you know that there is some work that needs to be done with the remaining 1,000. So I would urge people who are already on WOOCR and part of this webinar today to go back and start using the user activity report, because this is one place sitting remotely, especially in this order post-COVID, that you get to see what's happening with your initiative and users on WOOCR if they have a login ID. So I think that is something which has enabled a lot of rollouts for me being successful personally. I am sure that today you would have got the formula that we've been talking about. We will also publish this video. So even if people have not been able to attend this in your organization, please send them this video, because driving adoption is a topic that all our clients, all our customers have been coming back and talking to us, and we've been sharing this time and again. So we thought that we will capsule it in a way that it can be used again and again. I can take a minute more to see if you have any questions or queries. If not, then I would wind off today's webinar. So I'm just waiting for a minute. A quick announcement that WOOCR Wednesday webinar series is a weekly activity on every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. IST time. We will continue to bring in themes that are relevant to you, and also get a lot of industry speakers like we had last time for visual merchandising. Coming next week is a new feature webinar where you will get to see a very new exciting feature launch on WOOCR. So I don't see a question. I'm assuming that we were able to do a good job with today's webinar. So I'm concluding, signing it off for now. Thank you so much for being part of this and giving us all the energy and all the enthusiasm to do this time and again. Thank you so much. Look forward to see you on WOOCR Wednesdays. Please do spread the word in your organization so that more and more people can get benefited by this. Thank you. Take care. Good evening.